Hello, on today's episode we're going to talk about the 8 concerns that prevent happiness from the ancient texts. Hello everyone, as promised in the intro, today I want to talk about the 8 concerns that prevent happiness from the ingenious one, the Buddha, and his theory and doctrine on happiness. Buddha spent a lot of time looking at happiness and the causes of happiness and was able to get in touch with the universal intelligence to come down with what's called the Dharma or the teachings, and these things are really significant, even more so in our current day where happiness is plummeting. We think we live in a society that's happier than ever. The reality is that suicide rates and depression rates are higher than ever in recorded history. So what's happened and why have we lost this knowledge? So as always, I'm going to begin with a quote, and that quote is, "The problem is you think you have time." The Buddha. This is a very, very deep quote. Although it's only, 7 words, 8 words, it's incredibly deep. The concept of time, the idea of putting off or looking into the future for happiness, is one of the core roots of unhappiness. The present moment, which is where you come from, which is the only place you've ever existed. You've never existed in the past and the future. That patterns of electrical activity in your brain telling you that those things happen. But you've only ever existed in this moment. And to defer getting happy or to defer learning things into the future, you're really making yourself powerless, and it's at the cause of a lot of unhappiness. So what are these 8 concerns that prevent happiness? I'm going to go through them. This is some deep stuff as well, so it's going to require a little bit of description. It's also going to require you just sort of putting any beliefs or any systems that you have and just putting them in a box for a little while, locking them up, and then coming back to them at the end of this episode, because ultimately there are some very deep and profound truths that may actually contradict some of the things you currently believe. So what are the 8 concerns? So the first concern is taking delight in having money and material possessions. Wow. This pretty much goes against the entire stream of consumerism. That is, that governments now create citizen consumers who consume internally within the economy, stimulates demand and creates tax revenue for governments, which is the capitalist system that's been very popular, very successful over the last 100 odd years. However, when you take delight in money and material possessions, you are therefore putting yourself at the risk of those material possessions either degrading, being taken from you, or no longer being relevant. An example would be, everyone loves their new car, they take photos of it, post all over Facebook, but a couple of years later, no more photos of the car, people aren't talking about their car, so what's happened? Well, the happiness they put into that external material possession has ultimately lost its luster, and it's gone, and it evaporates. And continually training yourself to put your happiness into material objects creates muscle, and the muscle you build is the ability not to feel happy internally but externally, and then things crumble. People have a hard time wrapping their head around this, and I just use the words most recently, Whitney Houston and Heath Ledger, multi-millionaires who had everything but ended it because they couldn't handle the fact that they saw that these things could not give them happiness. Number 2, the second concern, being disappointed, upset, angry when we lose possessions or don't get them. This follows on to the real living a material lifestyle and always climbing for money rather than looking to yourself, means that ultimately you're going to be very upset when these things change, and you'll be very upset when you realize on your deathbed that you're not taking these things to the afterlife. This concept that we had, thousands of years ago, that you just put the stuff in your grave and you wake up in the afterlife and get to use your cool little chariot and all that sort of stuff. I think we've moved past that now. Number 3, feeling delighted when people praise us and approve us and tell us how wonderful they are. Well, this is an interesting one, because the way the world sees you is always going to be a mirage. Your true self is internal. And when you take a lot of pleasure or self-esteem from what people say about you, ultimately, once again, you're at the mercy of this. Very fickle. We all know that in Australia we have the tall poppy syndrome, where people get, put on a pedestal and then they're cut from under their feet because we love to see them fall. And that's what happens when you build your self-worth on others. If the tables turn, what have you got? Nothing. Feeling very upset and dejected when they criticize us and disapprove of us, even when they're telling us the truth. Once again, this is the other side of taking praise on board, is when you're criticized, ultimately it hurts you, because once again, you're relying on the outside world to project your self-worth. We talked about in the video of never putting external coordinates as your self-worth. This is key to that. Feeling dejected when we have a good reputation and good image. Well, once again, your image is manufactured. Your image doesn't matter. I mean, you could put on 10 kilos of muscle tomorrow, and that's pretty great, but it's not greater than the divine presence of consciousness that sees the entire world connected at once, which is what you are. So trying to add value, get better t-shirts, get better cars, better houses, that's all stuff that you can do, but putting your self-worth in it is a real problem. And then ultimately the opposite of that, being dejected and upset when you have a bad reputation. Once again, this reputation is a thought concept, and allowing a thought concept to create unhappiness in you creates weakness and vulnerabilities within you. Feeling delighted when we experience sense pleasures. This is going to be a challenging one to discuss. So fantastic sights, sounds, odors, tastes, and sensations. And then ultimately feeling upset when we have unpleasant sensations. Now, we live in what's called the Romanticist period. It's been around for about 200 years. It hasn't existed before in human history, but to give you a quick summary, the Romanticist period, which started in the 1800s, basically says everyone has the right to go out and have fun, party, look after their passions, and just, really sort of a hedonist lifestyle, get what you can before you die. And ultimately what happens there is you start winding your happiness up into sensations. So you'll go, I need to eat a lot of food to feel full and feel good. Well, that's not true, because once you become your awareness, you're still awareness that observes everything before your senses take over. There's already happiness there. So once again, creating a mutual dependency on all these items is ultimately going to be a weakness. So how do we protect ourselves? Because this is tough, like we're just told to go out and go to Bali and, go spend a week in the Maldives to relax, only to find out a week in the Maldives means we just stress out when we come back. And really we're bouncing around. So the first thing the Buddha would say is rely on the Dharma, not people. People will always let you down. Why? Because you have expectations of those people, not appreciations. Expectations are destined to fail. The Dharma, the teachings, the things that we know to be true from our human experience won't change. The fact that love is universal and we are all connected, that won't change depending on who you're talking to, right? It's always going to be true even when someone disagrees. 2, the idea of a finger pointing at the moon, this is really important. You'll be taught a lot of things in your life and you get a lot of contradicting messages, but the reality is that everything you're told is simply a finger pointing at the moon. And it's not the moon. So if I was to talk to you about the moon, and it's sort of like with dogs as well, when you've got the stick and you throw the stick but you didn't throw it and the dog still chases it, we're so desperate to find information that exists outside of us, when the reality is that it's right here, right now. Rely on wisdom, not an accumulation of knowledge. This is really powerful. I have learned a lot of things through structured education in my life, and most of it I've had to unlearn because it's just conditioned belief systems of the culture I'm in at the time, at this present moment and location, geolocation. So it's very, very dependent. The wisdom is the stuff you know feels right, you know it feels good, you know it comes from a place of love. 3, rely on the meaning of words, not words. This is so important. People are always trying to manifest and reflect how they feel inside, and they'll do that generally by talking. They'll say, this is what's going on, this and that. So what are they trying to get across to you? Forget the words. We're known as the lying ape when biologists look at our behavior patterns. Humans lie all the time. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to convey a message, but we don't look silly or stupid, so we don't use the real words. So look for the meaning behind the words people tell you. And finally, rely on the complete meaning, not the partial meaning. Ultimately, the complete meaning is always, I'm looking for connection and love in everything we do and everything we say. But make sure that you understand that, because quite often we'll say, well, this person, they have these conditions on love, and they have all these, these bits and pieces. That's the partial meaning. We all know that everything we do is based on connection and love. The problem is, you think you have time. If you don't get these things straight, you will run out of this time very, very quickly. And we're very lucky to have these people who have written down things like the Dharma or Socrates or Plato. These people have left building blocks for us. Look at what's real to you, look at what strikes your heart, and use that. It's definitely something to think about, and I can't wait to see you till tomorrow.